What's up, everybody? This is the Hedge Mage, and we're back again for another popper video and another sideboard guide for a deck that I just recently showcased with you guys. So, uh, last week we talked about what I am running for mono red burn or pinger burn. So in today's video, we're going to be doing an in-depth sideboard guide looking at some of the top decks in the meta at this moment and how we are going to be sideboarding against them. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely stick around. As always, if you want to support the channel, if you could leave a like on this video and hit that subscribe button, I would greatly appreciate the support. And with that out of the way, let's get into how I'm sideboarding against the meta. Right, so the first two matchups that I'm going to be talking about is the matchup between both Izzet Terror and Dimir Terror. You're going to want to be sideboarding very similarly to both of those because most of what we have in the sideboard is what we're going to be bringing in against both those matchups. So let's talk about what we're going to be taking out. So I think I am going to be taking out 4 needle drops. Even though I do love drawing cards off of these are also very much situational, is where we have to meet certain circumstances in order to even cast this spell. So the fact that they are running so much counter magic is definitely the first thing to go. So we're going to take those out, and what I'm going to bring in is I'm going to bring in 4 copies of Pyroblast because we are going to be needing to have counter spells of our own or be able to blow up any of their blue creatures. So Pyroblast is definitely something we want to bring in. That's kind of a no-brainer in the matchup since they are a blue deck. And then I'm also going to be taking out this one Cast in the Fire. We can use it to blow up a couple birds if they have a Murmuring Mystic out, but we're probably going to want to focus more on sweeping the board with things like End the Festivities and another card that I will be talking about soon. So we're going to take out one Cast in the Fire. We're going to bring in one Mind Collapse. This is a spell that we could potentially cast for free and deals 5 damage, so we can take out Terrors, we can take out Cryptic Serpents, we can also take out a Murmuring Mystic with that, which that can definitely pose a pretty big problem for us since they can kind of go wide and maybe deal more damage to us before we're really able to go off with our Kessig Flamebreavers and our Thermal Alchemists. Another thing that I'm going to take out is another more situational card with very specific circumstances, which is Skewer the Critics. It's probably one of our worst burn spells, though it can be really good when we have a pinger out. Though against them and all their counter spells, you may not always get a pinger to stick around or even enter the battlefield. So we're going to take out our 3 copies of Skewer the Critics, and then we're going to bring in 3 copies of Tormod's Crypt. So this we're bringing in basically to fight the graveyard and stall them out so that we can get set up and hopefully burn them to death before they're able to get any big creatures onto the battlefield. And then another thing is that they are running Murmuring Mystic most of the list now from what I have been seeing. So we're going to want to be dealing with all of those birds from all the spells that they're casting, creating more and more as they go wide and just hit us for a bunch of damage. So I'm going to actually take out, even though Lava Dart is really good against them, we want to be able to sweep their board. So we're going to take out these 2 Lava Darts, and I'm going to bring in 2 copies of Electrickery. So this will give us 4 sweepers that we can use against their army of birds. And that's pretty much how I would side against both matchups. We are definitely going to be wanting to deal with, the big creatures. So obviously our Mind Collapse, their graveyards, their Tormod's Crypt, Pyroblast is a must, and also sweeping the board on all their little bird tokens with our sweepers, like I've stated a couple times now. But yeah, that's how I would that's how I would sideboard against Terror. Right, and the next deck we're going to talk about is Dimir Faeries. So it is honestly going to be a pretty similar sideboard against Faeries, though we're not going to bring in the Graveyard Hate, but definitely the same thing again. We're taking out our Needle Drops against them. is very easily countered by a spell starter sprite, and it's also something that we can only cast if we have been able to deal a damage. Which they have plenty of counter magic to sort of tempo us out, so it's definitely not the strongest card against them. And obviously, we're taking those out. We're bringing in our four Pyroblasts, and same thing here against Dimir Faeries is that they do run a lot of one toughness creatures. So we are definitely bringing in two Electrickery. And with that, I'll take out the two, probably taking out the two Lava Darts again here. We don't really, it's something I don't really want to say goodbye to, is that it definitely lets us uh, sort of play a lot more spells to get a lot more triggers with Thermal Alchemist and Kessig Flame Breather, but we definitely want to be able to deal with their board. So dealing with all the fairies that they have on the field as well as the birds that they are creating with Murmuring Mystic. And that's pretty much all I would sideboard in against Dimir Fairies. We could also bring in other copies of Cast in the Fire since we can use that against them as well. But I'm more concerned with just sweeping their board since they do get a lot of one toughness creatures out. You can also bring in the Mind Collapse, though they don't run as many big boys as the Terrorless. So I want to focus more on just going face than necessarily dealing with the creatures all the time against them. Since I think they are running, a few copies of Gurmag Angler in the list, but it is mostly a lot of tempo plays, a lot of removal, and uh, ninjutsuing in their Ninja of the Deep Hours, and basically holding up a lot of counter spells until they can just take over the game. But yeah, that is how I would sideboard it against Dimir Fairies. And the next deck we're going to talk about sideboarding against is going to be Golgari Gardens or Golgari Control. So we're not bringing in a ton of cards. Only going to sideboard in 4 cards against them. We are going to have to deal with some of their larger threats, like their Avenging Hunter and their Trolls of Khazad-dûm. So we definitely want to bring in one Mind Collapse. And I'm just going to take out the Rift Bolt since it's really only a great turn 1 play against them. It is a really fun card to play, but definitely the Mind Collapse is going to be a lot better in that matchup. So we will take out the Rift Bolt against them and bring in Mind Collapse. And though when I was talking recently about how I would sideboard with Orzhov Ephemerate against them, and I was saying that I wasn't going to bring in Dust to Dust, in this matchup, I do actually want to bring in some Artifact Hate. So I'm going to take out these 3 copies of Skewer the Critics, since we're not always going to be able to meet the right circumstances to uh, play this for its spectacle costs. Also, with a lot of their creature removal, our Thermal Alchemists and our Kessig Flame Breathers aren't necessarily always going to be around for very long. So definitely taking out the Skewer of the Critics and bringing in 3 more Casts into the Fire. And the reason for that is we definitely want to either get rid of their Lembuses when they don't have the mana to sacrifice it to gain 3 life, as well as getting rid of their tithing blades so they aren't able to craft with an artifact or creature, because that allows them to gain small bits of life over time, and any life gain that our opponents are able to make is really going to hurt our plan. So we really want to shut that down, which is why I want to bring in the cast into the fire so that we can deal with those very specific artifacts. All right, and the next deck that we want to talk about sideboarding against is a Glitters builds. Most likely it's gonna be the Blue-White Affinity or Jeskai Affinity. You will see Orzhov and Boros Affinity as well. This is probably how you would sideboard against most of them. Definitely there's an argument to bring in some Pyroblasts against the blue-white version, though the only blue spell that they often play is either a Thought Cast or a Metallic Rebuke. So they're not playing a ton of stuff for us to interact with the pyroblast. So I'm generally not thinking about bringing that in. I'm more concerned with dealing with their artifacts and the fact that they are probably going to bringing in some acolytes to prevent damage. So that's definitely something we want to be prepared for. So with that in mind, we are definitely bringing in three cast into the fires, and I'll take out these three skewer the critics, since we won't not necessarily 100% of the time be able to play it for its spectacle cost. Definitely one of the weaker cards, but we need to bring in those cast into fires to fight their artifacts. And then we're also going, since we are anticipating that they will be bringing in the acolytes, I'm going to take out these two and the festivities since they don't have a ton of one toughness creatures outside of what is it, the ginger brutes. Yep. So they have the ginger brutes, but we can easily deal with the ginger brutes through any of our other damage spells. But yeah, and the festivities isn't going to hit a lot in the affinity deck, so we're going to take those out, and then we'll bring in two flaring pains since we are anticipating that they are bringing in acolytes. A lot of them are running the acolyte that can prevent red damage. Um, so definitely got to bring that in against them so that they can't can't prevent it. Alright, guys, and the last matchup that we're talking about today is definitely going to be Mono Red Kuldotha. And we're honestly not going to be taking in a whole lot against them. The big thing we have to deal with is the fact that they do go wide when they play Golgari Rebirth, which we can't allow to happen. They can get a lot of damage through, and the big thing with this matchup is you just have to be faster than them. You have to outrace them essentially, because you are both, for the most part, burn decks. I would definitely consider this more of a classic burn deck than Golgari Red, which I especially with certain builds now, they definitely seem much more close to just mono red aggro attempting to go wide with a lot of creatures. Definitely more aggro than sort of spell slinger type burn like this deck is. So we definitely want to outrace them, and it's a really tough thing to do in this matchup because this matchup is really kind of knowing exactly when to deal with their board and when to go face. Most of the time, you're going to want to be going face, but you are going to find yourself in situations where you're going to have to blow up a Blast Runner or a Goblin Tomb Raider in order to n- not take so much damage because you don't really have a lot of blockers with this kind of list as we're only running 8 creatures, just the 8 pingers. So what we're definitely bringing in to kind of stop that from happening is we're just going to bring in two electricity since we are going to need to deal with when they play Kuldotha Red or Kuldotha Rebirth rather. So we're gonna have to deal with that, and especially if they drop a Goblin Bushwhacker, we don't want to get caught with our pants down. So bringing in two electricity against them, and I'm gonna take out one cast into the fire and one Rift Bolt since these two cards aren't the greatest against them. Obviously, we can exile artifacts with cast into the fire so we can take away their great furnace, but they don't run so many artifacts that I'm really looking at casting the fire. And Rift Bolt is definitely not the greatest spell against them. It's a great turn one play, but paying 3 mana for 3 damage in this deck is definitely not something we want to be doing. So I'm going to take out the Rift Bolt and the Cast in the Fire and just bring in the two electricities. So not bringing in a ton against them again, but very much we want to be able to deal with their board as their board can definitely get out of hand very, very quickly. And our goal here is just to outrace them and play more burn spells than they are, and hopefully we survive long enough to do it. I have definitely had some very tough matchups against Kuldotha Red since we don't really have much for blockers. Our blockers do have, 3 toughness, so they can be decent blockers against their 1 or 2 toughness creatures. However, they can easily deal with that if they are also running lava darts and are our 1/3s or our 0/3s in our Thermal Alchemists and our Catholic Flame Breathers have taken 2 damage, they can just lava dart them and kill them. And this deck functions the best when we have our pingers on the field, so we don't really want to lose our pingers, especially in a last ditch effort to block their creatures. So that is why I'm only bringing in the electricities against them, but that's going to do it for today's video, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this sideboard guide for my version of Pinger Burn. But I would like to hear from you as well on what you think about my sideboarding choices here. Are there cards that you would want to bring into your sideboard to fight against these various matchups that we've discussed? And are there ways that you would have sideboarded differently? Definitely love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. As always, I hope you all are having a wonderful day, and I will see you all next time.